Ben Roethlisberger believes that it would be a good idea to go for the two-point conversion every single time in the NFL. Now, he didn't outrightly state that the Pittsburgh Steelers in 2016 will be going for the two-point conversion every single time, but it did pose a good argument because as the PAT moved back, success rate dropped, and in the Steelers' case, which we'll get to some graphics in a second, they took the most two-point conversions last year, and they were pretty successful with it. It does change a lot of strategy because if you miss it on that first attempt for that first touchdown, I think there's a couple things that go into play here. One, you got to be a team that scores a lot of touchdowns. You got to have a good high-power offense because you need a fail-safe if you botch the two-point conversion. You know, if you're not getting to the end zone in the first place, well, guess what? You're not going to get that many two-point conversion attempts. So let's go to Big Ben's words because Big Ben has been a staple to the NFL, an ambassador to the game. Why not? Roethlisberger said, put it in our hands. I want the ball. Any player would relish that opportunity. That's what he told ESPN and Pro Football Talk. And as a quarterback of at least Roethlisberger's caliber, Super Bowl winning quarterback, obviously one of the elite QBs in the league, and with an offense like the Steelers, it kind of makes sense. This guy's a playmaker. He wants the ball in his hands.
Yeah.
Francis, we're going to the two-point success rate now. This is C10. This is just from 2015, which actually saw a major rise in two-point conversions, likely because of the PAT moving back and not just being a chip shot anymore. So this is graphic C10, and this is the two-point success rate for last year. So the Steelers had 11 two-point attempts, which is, again, such a small sample size, but, again, more than any other team, and they made 8 of them, 72.5% success rate. The Green Bay Packers, Tennessee Titans, and Kansas City Chiefs right behind them, and then it starts to dwindle off onto teams like the Vikings, who were 20th, who were 1 for 1. They had a 100% success rate. Now the Baltimore Ravens.
What's the Broncos?
1 for 4. I only took the top 20 because that's
They're
what.
not even in the top 20.
Well, some teams didn't take.
Didn't
I did it by attempts. How many teams actually?
Interesting.
I'm sorry. I did it by success rate for the most part. No, well, success rate based on attempts.
Yeah.
Now let's move forward because if you look at the next graphic, the PAT success rate, look all the way to the right. The teams that were. You know, if you're the Steelers, for example, and you have a 72.5 success two-point rate, and you compare that to the Seattle Seahawks' 88% extra point completion percentage, well, that's not that far off. The problem is, you know, extra points made, extra points attempted is so much higher than two-point conversions attempted, two-point conversions made. So, you know, the Steelers didn't have too much of a problem. They had a 90. Well, actually, they were on the bottom half of the list. So they had a 90. They were almost as close with the two-point success rate. The point of all this, Francis, is do you think it's a good idea? How much of the strategy changes? And, of course, I think ratings are already through the roof. What way to make it better if you don't even have to watch a chip shot? You get to see an even more exciting play.
Yeah.
Plus, I guess the chance of the turnover being returned back for 2 points does have its likelihood.
For me, it comes down to how your offense runs, right? I was surprised. I wanted to see the Denver Broncos there because they didn't score a lot of touchdowns, and I wanted to see if there was a case to be made that if you don't score as many touchdowns consistently, you maybe go for the two-point conversion to take advantage of that touchdown in which you do
at least
manage to obtain.
I think we're trying to also at least on offense. Like you're saying defensively, that's where their strength was.
Yeah, and I'm saying that, so they were stronger defensively, but I'm saying how many games did we see last season be decided by field goal attempts? Like there wasn't as many touchdowns, I think, from what the games that I noticed where I would be like, all right, if you're scoring at a high percentage of touchdowns, if you're scoring touchdowns quite a lot during the game, then and you're doing it efficiently, then again the reasoning is do you change it or do you stick to what works? If you're not scoring as many touchdowns, therefore when you do get that opportunity for a two-point play, it would make sense to go and try and take advantage of that.
Right.
Because if you're not going to score 3-4 touchdowns a game and maybe only get one and then rely on field goals shots, maybe you would take advantage of it if I articulated that somewhat decent.
I think you know what, we'll give it a B.
A B plus. I was just if you're trying rather than people may make the case that teams who score more touchdowns would try to score more two-point conversions, right? Because you have more of a sample size to work with it. But that's more of a sample size for someone else to figure it out.
Right.
Figure out that you're trying to score two-point plays quite a lot. Whereas if you only score maybe 1 or 2 touchdowns per game, you're automatically at a disadvantage against a team that consistently scores. So therefore, you may try and get the 2 points to take advantage of that.
I see what you're saying.
I make my case.
According to the Twitter poll by myself, should an NFL team go for 2 every time? 58% said yes.
Ooh.
42% said no, they should not go for 2 every time. I think it would be an interesting tactic. The same goes for should you ever punt.
Yeah.
You know, we talk all the time on like when we do Turks and Jerks and Best and Worst of the NFL, you know, J.R. Jackson and Ben and the occasional Cenk Uygur sighting on the show, and of course we'll bring on Chris Liss as well. And when they talk about it, it's one of those things where it's like if you're in positive territory, you should never punt the ball.
Yeah.
Always just go for it. And even if you're on like your opponent's, if you're on your own 40, you know, the odds of making that play, you get the extra down, what would the numbers look like? The problem, again, that comes down to something like the 2-point conversion and always going for it on 4th down, the sample size is small.
Yeah.
So 8 out of 11 looks pretty good, but if you do it 100 times during the NFL season, likelihood is it's not going to be 72.5%.
Yeah,
it would probably drop towards a 60-ish.
Teams will start to prepare against you if you start to do it. Teams will start
also
to prepare,
be aware
they'll understand. Whereas if you do it, as I mentioned, if you don't score as much, then it's hard for that team to kind of gauge that sample size. And it really just comes down to whether or not you're creative enough. And the players you have that can run that play, right? Every quarterback every quarterback's obviously going to be talented enough to be able to throw it at that point.
It's a little different with the Steelers when you have Antonio Brown and if Le'Veon Bell when he's healthy and Ben Roethlisberger. You have Roethlisberger, you have playmakers there. If you're the Jacksonville Jaguars and Blake Bortles, I know I call him Blake Bottles, has maybe one receiver. Who's the Allen? No, it's not Allen Hurns. Dan, who's the receiver on Jacksonville? Just so I don't. Allen Robinson, thank you. If you're the Jacksonville Jaguars and your best threat is just one receiver in Allen Robinson, then, you know, it might not be as great of an idea.
Exactly.
All right, comment below with what you think. Should an NFL team go for 2 every single time? Like, favorite, subscribe to the video at Francis_Maxwell on Twitter, at JasonRubin91 on Twitter, at 2IG Sports on Twitter.